Welcome to I Love to Tell the Story, a podcast on the narrative lectionary. I'm Rolf Jacobson.
I'm Jenny Pietz.
Lois Malcolm.
This is the podcast for April 18th, 2025. And the text is Luke 23, 32 through 47, Jesus' crucifixion. So for a bit of context, Jesus has been betrayed by Judas and arrested. He was given what amounts to a sham trial and sentenced to death. Pilate allowed the people to choose between releasing either Jesus or Barabbas from custody. So a custom at Passover was to release to the Jewish people somebody who was in custody, and the people chose to free Barabbas, who was a murderer and insurrectionist. So this is the context in which Jesus has been sent to be executed unjustly as a criminal with two other criminals. And Luke's gospel makes a point that Jesus is innocent. Nonetheless, the gospel paints a powerful picture of Jesus, innocent man, Son of God, being crucified between these two criminals. One repents, one derides Jesus to the very end. And this is a really powerful image of Jesus literally getting in the midst of human sinfulness and dying our death. All of us sin. All of us are also subject to the effects of other people's sins. And Jesus dies the death of all of us and identifies with humanity in a really powerful way in this text. What struck the two of you about Luke's version of the crucifixion?
One of the things that really stood out to me is the fact that Jesus is the innocent sufferer. The sentence that Jesus says precisely when he dies, he cries out with a loud voice, "Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit," which is a contrast to Mark and Matthew's, my God, why have thou forsaken me?" So with Mark and Matthew, you have very much this cry, this protest of anguish, in a sense, from Psalm 22, where here it's from another psalm, which is much more that passive, almost passive acceptance of the suffering righteous, as you find in Isaiah 53. And here's the paradox, or the theme from Jewish literature that Luke brings out. It's this paradoxical sense that it's precisely the suffering of the innocent one that is the one that grants both the mercy to the perpetrator that Jenny was talking about, both the sinner and, in a sense, those victimized. Both there is forgiveness for the sinner, but there is also mercy and compassion for those who have been victimized by what others have done. But in this case, the picture is not one of that protest that you have in Psalm 29, but here it's that passive acceptance of God's call to be the suffering servant.
Yeah. What strikes me this year are the two other last words also. The first one, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," which it's in your English translation, the line is in double brackets, which indicates that it is not present. That line is not present in the most ancient manuscripts of the New Testament that we have, and that at least some New Testament text critics judge that it's not original to the text, although others do believe it's original to the text. My teacher, Don Jewell, said something like, of all the troubling verses that he knew in the Bible, this was most troubling at all. For if we need to be forgiven for what we don't know, if there's things about us that are true and we don't know them and we need to be forgiven for them, then what is left of human will? And of course, the answer is not much, or even nothing. So that not only, as Lois said, is there forgiveness for others and the victimized, apparently there's forgiveness for the victimizers also. And then this line from Psalm, you quoted the line from Psalm 31 and verse 46. In verse 43, Jesus' line to one of the two thieves. If you look at art of the crucifixion, almost all art, I shouldn't say almost all, a lot of art is very taken with this particular view of the Passion, where there's two different thieves, and then you'll get like sort of a sheep and the goat sort of version. On one side is the thief who repents, and then you get some characters who are repent. On the other side is the thief who doesn't, but mocks Jesus, and you get some characters. It's sort of like here's the sheep on one side and the goats on the other. And of course, painters like to paint dramatic scenes, not boring scenes, and this is dramatic. But Jesus answers and says, the one at least, "Today you will be with me in paradise. And I always love this bit of trivia. Both thieves are unnamed in the Bible, but Christian tradition has decided to name the thief who repents. And do you remember his name without looking it up?
Yep.
Saint Dismas. There you go. Saint Dismas is according to tradition. And I don't think that has any particular meaning, but trivia. It's good to know trivia.
I was going to add something about Jesus's words. As Rolf noted in Mark and Matthew, there's the cry of abandonment. Or I'm sorry, perhaps it was Lois who noted this. My God, why have you forsaken me? In Luke's gospel, it's an expression of trust in God. Into your hands I commit my spirit, or I commend my spirit. I think it's powerful to consider those different portraits of Jesus's last words on the cross, and just to think pastorally about when one or the other might resonate more with people. I think there are times when people are going through suffering that doesn't make sense and they feel abandoned. And Mark and Matthew's version allows people to voice that. I think Luke's version is powerful. Perhaps for those who are being persecuted, it's thought perhaps that Luke's gospel is portraying Jesus as a martyr, as a sort of encouragement for early Christians who may have been martyred. Perhaps for those who are being persecuted for their faith, having an image of Jesus confident in God as he faces this unjust death could be encouraging or empowering. When everything else around you seems out of control, that could be an encouraging portrait. So I appreciate the fact that we get more than one take on Jesus's last words and how that might resonate with people at different times and different situations.
And I'd like to comment on another of Jesus' words here that Rolf commented on. The Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. When I used to teach the forgiveness course with my colleague, Jan Ramsey, when she was still teaching here at Luther Seminary, this verse would often come up in our conversations. And what's helpful about this verse pastorally is that often the people who have hurt us and that we are wrestling to forgive often don't know what they've done. And so what's interesting about this passage is that on the one hand, we can give it up to the Father as Jesus does here. We can give up the Father does the forgiving. Jesus hands it over, and we can hand it over to Jesus and the Father, the triune God, to do the forgiving even if we're not able. And even in situations where the other people do not recognize, and we can just hand that over, which is another sort of comforting piece.
I Love to Tell the Story is a production of Luther Seminary's Working Preacher. The narrative lectionary was developed at Luther Seminary and has been hosted on Working Preacher since 2011. Find episodes and links at workingpreacher.org/narrative. And be sure to rate, subscribe, and comment on YouTube. Thanks for joining us.